Hey all. So, promised a movie update video at some point, and some big news happened today, so I thought I'd just wrap up all the basic news that's come up in a video, and I'll try to make this shorter than some of the other ones, but you never know, I ramble. So, first thing I want to talk about. A couple weeks ago, Alamo announced that they were filing Chapter 11 bankruptcy. When I first heard that, immediately I panicked, and then I didn't panic so much. Essentially, despite the fact that Alamo has other sources of revenue that other theaters don't, like, merchandise from Mondo, ties with people who have connections with, like, the Neon Film distribution and stuff like that. A lot of I think they only had somewhere between 37 and 41 locations. I kept getting different numbers from different sources, and I think that's because some of their locations are franchised and some of those locations are owned by the corporation. But they have a very small number in their footprint, and some of those locations had been dark and had stayed dark. The Los Angeles one, obviously, that kind of just opened, and things like that. So they filed. But, a lot of people, they hear bankruptcy for the corporation and they automatically think it's going out of business. That's not what's happening. They did decide to close down 3 underperforming locations, including one of the flagship locations in Austin, Texas. And to halt construction or acquisition, whichever they were doing, of an Orlando location that they were working on. But it looks like the bankruptcy is letting them get purchased by sort of like private equity or private investment, which, that can be horrible. Bain Capital, Mitt Romney's old job, they used to sort of pump and dump these corporations, or same thing happened like Toys R Us. Obviously, these investors, they buy it and they sell it off for scraps type stuff, and then these corporations, these companies die and don't come back. But what's happening here is one of the investment groups is an investment group that has already had money in Alamo in the past, and one of the people in that investment group is Tim League, who was the former CEO of Alamo, and I believe he was still on the board when he gave up the CEO position. Tim League, I wouldn't say I've met him, but I've been in the same room with him when he's done like a Q&A and some other stuff, and just from what I know of him, he himself actually is a big movie person. He didn't just get into theatrical distribution because it was just a business he wanted to get into. And I know he is very concerned that Alamo keeps its normal, its pastiche, its philosophy, and all that stuff. He wants to keep Alamo. So it looks like, for the most part, the Alamo Drafthouse isn't going to change. They're going to try to still keep it the same. It's just, bankruptcy helps them to sort of renegotiate some of the leases and stuff, especially, if they still owe rent from months when they couldn't operate and that sort of thing. My personal Alamo, it looks like it's staying open. I know last year, when I went to the top brass screening for the Oscars, top brass is like if you see like 75 movies or more, some ridiculous number that of course I did. And they had the special screenings you could see for free, and I like to go, this was the second year in a row I'd gone to watch the Oscars at Alamo, just because I like seeing the Oscars on the big screen. They usually have these comedians or whomever who, talk or do like games and prizes during the commercials. It's a very fun time. And during that, this guy from a group called AV Geeks said that Alamo Raleigh was, I believe, the 8th most attended or 8th highest grossing of all of the 37 to 41 Alamo locations. So considering it's in the top 10, I assumed we would stay open. And considering how horrible 2020 was and the fact that 2021 is starting to look a little bit better, if my Alamo closed down, I'd probably sink into a hard depression. They still have show times going into April, and I just looked today, they have some set up for May, so it looks like at least my Alamo's not going anywhere, and if you live near an Alamo, unless you're one of those 3 locations, it seems like most of yours are staying put too, so there'll be, I'm sure, more news on that, but it looks like, despite that, Alamo's fine. I also did read, there was a couple articles about this that came out, and there was someone in the corporation who said, like, a lot of people have been, like, consoling him, and he was saying, like, no, this is actually a good thing. This is what will actually allow us to keep operating type stuff. So, there you go. As far as theaters opening, since the last time I recorded, like, a movie update video, which was when that Paramount Plus news dropped, We now have theaters open in New York City and state, but city is big, as well as Los Angeles is opening or has opened this past weekend. So those are pretty much the two biggest movie-going markets in the United States. They still have severely restricted capacity stuff, so I think it's 20% in both. Maybe one of them's 25. And theaters really can't be profitable at that kind of restriction unless they had like way too many showtimes and big movies and everything. So doesn't mean everything's back to normal, doesn't mean everything's good to go, doesn't mean we're out of the woods yet. It just means we see a clearing away from the woods. We are the end is in sight as long as the vaccinations can go higher than the variants of COVID get spread. On that note, the New York Times has a ticker, no, not a really ticker, but every day they update this graph of people who have been fully vaccinated, a percentage in the United States, and those who have at least one shot. And it looks like at least 1/4 of the country, 25%, has had at least one shot if they're doing the 2-shot dose. I don't know how many people have been vaccinated with the 1-shot Johnson & Johnson one. And then it's something like 12.5 have been fully vaccinated. So depending on how fast those numbers tick up, the better theatrical exhibition will be, because, as I said in some previous videos, the speed in which the theatrical exhibition movie business comes back is inexorably tied with how fast people can get vaccinated, and then, of course, having product to make people go back out again. But with New York and LA open now, last weekend's box office didn't slip as much as it was expected to. Obviously, we're still at suppressed pandemic numbers, so we're not seeing movies like Raya and the Last Dragon, or Chaos Walking, or Tom and Jerry, or anything that's been opening at numbers they would have made if there was no COVID thing going on. And of course, some of these movies are also released day and date. Raya and the Last Dragon is extra $30, and you can rent it if you have Disney Plus. Tom and Jerry's day and date with HBO Max, and so on. Chaos Walking is theatrical exclusive, and I saw it, but nobody else did. So it's actually, by the way, just aside, Chaos Walking, getting a lot of shit from critics and everything, it's a perfectly fine, enjoyable science fiction adventure movie. It's not great. You can definitely tell where there were reshoots and everything, but it's not this crazy disaster that the studio and some of the critics are claiming. It's not Battlefield Earth or anything. It's a perfectly fine C+ movie, and I had fun and enjoyed it and didn't think it was all too bad. But anyway, regardless. So the next sort of big test for health of the theatrical experience, we got Nobody opening this weekend, the Bob Odenkirk movie, but I don't expect that to do too much. It's, a comedy action movie. But Godzilla v. Kong, or Kong v. Godzilla, I forget what order they're putting it in. I think it's Godzilla v. Kong. That opens next week on Wednesday. So a week from tomorrow when I'm recording this. And that's still day and date with HBO Max. So that will cut into some of it. But it will be very interesting to see what that grosses both domestically and internationally, and what that foretells for health going forward for that. Disney. Today, actually, I believe it was, Disney announced that they were putting Cruella and, more importantly, Black Widow in theaters and Disney Plus with the $30 price tag at the same time. So it looks like Disney, they kept wanting to put Black Widow in theaters exclusive when theaters were back. Looks like they still don't have confidence that that's going to happen soon enough for them, and I assume they're just sitting on this movie and they just need to bring in revenue from it at this point. So that they pushed it back from May to July, and then Cruella's still dropping in May. And it's going to be the $30 to rent it on Disney Plus, and then also in theaters. And obviously, countries that don't have Disney Plus, they'll still get it in theaters, and hopefully by July, we'll see. I believe the president of the U.S. Said that everyone, or he wants everyone at the state level to be able to sign up for the vaccine by May. Right now, it's just different tiered groups depending on what state you're in. So hopefully if that speeds up vaccinations as the summer goes on, then, maybe we'll get close to something that looks like pre-COVID normal by fall. I don't know. But whatever summer movie season we have, it looks like it's going to be kind of a hodgepodge of day-and-date movies and stuff that's getting put in theaters regardless. But at least it looks like theaters will at least stay open. So, fingers crossed. On top of that, Regal, which has been closed for 6 months now. They reopened with Tenet in August, September, and then they closed down again in, I want to say, November. And they basically said, hey, we can't just reopen for one movie. We are going to wait till there's a steady stream of theatrical product to reopen because we're losing money opening our doors than we would just staying closed and racking up debts from our rents. I believe it's similar to the Cineworld in the UK. Cineworld owns Regal, which is in the US, and it's its own chain in the UK as well. But I guess there's enough stuff coming out, and enough stuff is making okay amounts of money, and capacity restrictions are varied on state and region and all that stuff. So Regal could open, I believe they said, as early as April 2nd. So they'll miss the first 2 days of Kong's opening. Well, I think they said they were opening a handful, 5 theaters or something, in time for Kong, and then the rest would open in April 2nd for the most part in the U.S. So at that point, it won't just be AMC and Cinemark and some other chains. Regal, which is the second biggest chain after AMC, will be reopened, and that's, that'll certainly help because, there's a lot of people who, some other theaters might be open, but the theater chain that's closest to them is Regal, so they have to drive really far for the theater or not at all. So we'll see how much Regal being open, still with capacity restrictions based on where they're located, will drive up some of those box office grosses as well. So time will tell on that one. But that was certainly big news. So aside from Disney doing that and Regal opening, news part and parcel with Regal. Regal announced that they came to an agreement with Warner Brothers on theatrical windows for 2022. So it looks like Warner Brothers is going to stick with their day-and-date HBO Max for 2021. We don't know how that's doing for HBO Max subscribers, but so far they've had Wonder Woman 84, they've had Little Things, Judas and the Black Messiah, Tom and Jerry, that Studio Ghibli movie, that name I always forget, and the Snyder Cut, which isn't in theaters currently, I don't think. I think they might do a special IMAX thing at some point, but it's exclusive to HBO Max right now. It looks like they might be ticking up on subscribers. I know they said they were heading ahead of where their projections were on that for their subscriber base. So it looks like it was pretty successful for them, and luckily for them, Judas and the Black Messiah got a decent number of Oscar nominations, and it got those Oscar nominations just as the movie was leaving HBO Max, which I'm sure the theaters are happy about because now that they have that Oscar-nominated movie exclusively for a month. So if you didn't sign up for HBO Max and stream it in time, you want to see this Oscar movie before the Oscars actually happen in late April, well, theaters is your only option right now. So, that tends to work out. And, it dropped on HBO Max just as Academy members were starting to vote on this stuff. So that seemed to be really good timing there. Jared Leto did get his Golden Globe nomination, but he was left out of the Oscars because, expected to. But Tom and Jerry's surprisingly strong box office gross, at least, surprised to me at least, also seems to foretell that HBO Max is doing okay. I mean, we'll see. I mean, Godzilla and Kong comes out, which is day and date. The next big movie after that is another Warner Brothers day and date movie. It's Mortal Kombat sometime in mid-April. So we'll see. And I don't know, aside from my review, which only, a few people watched, if you've been anywhere on the internet in the past week or so, you know that fuckload of people have been watching the Snyder Cut. I'm not sure if all of those people actually subscribe to HBO Max, or some of them are pirating, or some of them are sharing other people's passwords or whatever. But they've certainly drove the film Twitter and film narrative for the past weekend or whatever. So, as I was saying, though, Regal came up with this, or they reached an agreement with Warner Brothers for 2022 for a theatrical window, and they settled on 30 to 45 days. 45 days, it looks like, for most movies, or depending on theatrical performance, and 30 days for the ones that don't gross as much, which is pretty much the exact same window that Paramount's using for Paramount Plus. So with two big studios now setting their theatrical window at 30 to 45 days, it looks like that's probably what the new norm is going to be, especially with Warner Brothers and Regal reaching that deal specifically for 2022. It looks like the pre-COVID theatrical window of 90, I think that's gone. I don't think it's going to come back. I think I think the wind done gone on that one. But it looks like they decided to just split it in half. So I think with Warner Brothers on that for next year, and with Paramount starting that this year, I think some of the other studios will probably play ball, and they'll agree that they could work with that. Now, the fun thing about this, aside from if Disney, which has done hodgepodge, and Universal, which has done 17 days, whether they'll play ball with that remains to be seen, and then whether the theaters will play ball with them remains to be seen. But after the theatrical window, whatever it ends up being, 30 days, 45 days, something different, what happens after that? So, because we have studios that have their own streaming service, and some of them are putting it directly on the streaming service, some of them are putting it on the streaming service with an upcharge. Some of these studios are putting it on PVOD, either because they don't have a streaming service, or they're just going that route. And what? Is it going to be a hodgepodge? Is it going to be movies are in theaters, and then some movies, depending on who puts it out, will put it direct to your streaming service? Or some movies, they'll just put it direct to PVOD? Will studios take a different approach with their movies? Will it be like, oh, Fast and Furious, yeah, that's going on PVOD. We're not dropping that to Peacock. That's the Universals, right? Yeah, Peacock. But then some other movie that's smaller, they'll be like, oh yeah, that can go direct to our streaming service, something like that. I don't know. So if whatever the window is, that's what matters for the theater business and the theater experience. How long do the theaters have it just to themselves? When that window ends, studios may be going with completely different strategies for what they do then, whether they do PVOD, direct to streaming, streaming plus fee, physical media at that point. Do they put it out for, you can buy it now on disc? That will be interesting to see what happens with that. Whether there'll be a concerted effort that everybody decides, there's a theatrical window, then there's a PVOD window, then there's a streaming window, or it's theaters, streaming, whatever. And then studios that don't have a streaming service, like Sony, they had Crackle years ago, and then they sold that out. But Sony doesn't have it. Mini majors like Lionsgate don't. Sam Goldwyn? I don't know if they do. Aren't they owned by Sony? I don't remember. So, what happens with that? With these, when Lionsgate releases the new Saw movie, is that just gonna, go direct to PVOD? Are they then just gonna license it to other streaming services? Like, let's say, movie is released by studio with no streaming service, 45 days expire. Do they say, like, hey, who wants it? Amazon Prime, Netflix? Do you want it immediately, or do they say like no? Let's get some PVOD income in there, and then we'll sell it off, or we'll license it out at least to a streaming service, not sell it off. That will be interesting to see. So that was sort of the big news, and I'm about at half what I normally spend on these. So we got Alamo bankruptcy, but staying in business, and will hopefully not change too much. We have Disney changing around its release schedule a little bit. They also dated some of their legacy Fox movies, Free Guy, Death on the Nile, The King's Man. Those seem to be all theater exclusive. Remember, Disney, aside from having Disney Plus, which in the US is just for their PG-13 and lower family stuff for the most part, plus their Marvel and Star Wars, they have a Disney something else. They call it Disney Star or Disney 18 Plus or whatever in a couple other countries where you can watch like Family Guy on their service. But in the US, Disney has a majority stake in Hulu. So, and there are like subscription bundles where you can get like Disney Plus, Hulu, and ESPN bundled together for a price. So it also remains to be seen if they would put things on Hulu with an upcharge or not, or if there's other competing clauses that go on with that. But Disney they've changed some dates. Black Widow, which is the one everyone was looking at, is going to be $30 to rent on Disney Plus and in theaters, so it's not going to be theatrical exclusive anymore. Warner Brothers has cut a deal with Regal, so that in 2022 they're at the 30 and 45-day window. Regal's reopening starting next week. New York and LA have opened with severe, like 20%, 25% restricted capacities. What else was the news I talked about? There was so much news the past couple of weeks, and I just wanted to put out as quick a video as I could possibly make about all of these topics, just so in the event that I am your only source of this news, or you just enjoy having me talk about it, or whatever the 20 to 50 of you that watch my videos on a regular basis care about. I just want to give all you guys all that information. So, housekeeping stuff. I'm piecemeal working on a Dave's Film Faves video about a Serbian film. I did that unboxing, but this is going to talk about the movie and some of the different editions that have come out and all that stuff. That's probably going to be a bit lengthy, so I've been filming it up in chunks, and then I'll edit it together at some point. I don't know. Hopefully early April I'll have that up. But otherwise, yeah, I'll keep making random update videos when I feel like it as big news breaks, and otherwise I talk about my normal stuff. I'll review things that I feel need a review and all that sort of thing. So, thanks for watching again, and hope you have a good day.